Good morning, University of Pretoria. It's really great to have another webinar with you this morning, and I'm hoping that you're going to get some great value from our time together. So let's just give everybody a chance to get on board with our session, and hopefully the weather is good with you wherever you are this morning, and trust that it's been a good week for you so far. I think it's exam time coming up, so hopefully the studying and all the hard work is panning out. Of course, I'm the student success coach, and I'll talk a little bit about myself just now for the purposes of introduction. But I offer community and content to support students to get themselves successful in their studies, and we've got quite a vibrant community on Facebook. In the description of my videos, you can see all the links, and you can go and check out the courses, and I really would invite you to join us on the Facebook group, and of course to subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you can get almost daily tips, and people find a lot of value from someone else, I think, who's been successful at a postgraduate level. It takes someone who's been through it, and also at an undergraduate level, of course, to help other people get there. So good morning to everybody that's coming online, and great that you guys are seeing everything coming through and got sound, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's just make sure we've got everybody online and getting some input coming through on their side for audio and visual. All right, so I think we're going to get cracking. We've got about 36 viewers concurrent, which is fantastic. I think at the last webinar we had about 50, and obviously the full stream recording will be available on the channel at the same link. And I've already put the two courses that I'll be talking about this morning in the description for this video, so you can have a squiz there. And as we promised through the University of Pretoria email, that you'll be able to get free seats onto those courses. But before we get to the courses, I'm going to take you through just some interesting insights so that you get some value from the session this morning. So just by way of introduction, as I said, my name is Peter Alkema, and if you were at the webinar last time, you'll have seen this, but graduated with a PhD earlier this year from WITS, and of course because of coronavirus, wasn't able to have a ceremony in person in the WITS Great Hall, and I guess one has to deal with these disappointments as you go through your life, but had a very special graduation from home ceremony, top left there, which my wife and family organized, which was fantastic. And on the top right there, you'll see my brand, the Student Success Coach, and got courses on Udemy, and then the Facebook community and the YouTube channel. And those are really the three primary platforms where you'll be able to benefit and consume the content that I create, and hopefully achieve your goals as a result of that support. So I'm passionate about helping students be successful. I also coach a number of students individually, and that's not something that I charge for. We can always set up a 30-minute coaching call, and I can give you some insights and support, and then check in with you as you need to. But the best way to reach me is to hop onto the Facebook group, and of course I think many of you are already students of mine on Udemy, so you can interact with me there as well. And just really need all your feedback to make sure that we're supporting you as best as we possibly can. And this morning, last time we looked at writing and employability, and writing is a very important skill at a university level. And even more important, as you progress in your studies, potentially go on to postgraduate and do lots of research as well. And if your ability to be successful will be hugely dependent on how well you can write and how well you can communicate. And the primary form of assessing, certainly at a postgraduate level and even at an undergraduate level, when you're completing exams, of course you're writing all the time. So we went through that in some detail, and I shared some content that you could take to improve your writing skills, and people really benefit from that because I give practical, tangible tips and techniques to help writing. And we also looked at employability, how you need to position yourself and your brand so that you can get into the workplace successfully. So, that was really the content of the previous webinar, and you can obviously go look at the video there of the live stream, and you can still go and have a look at those 2 courses. But this morning, what we wanted to talk about was, some of the issues that are going on in the business world, because, as students, once you get through and you're successful and you position yourself, you've made certain that you're employable and you've got the skills and the qualification, hopefully from a top university like University of Pretoria, do you have an understanding of what's going on in the world today? And we've obviously had a massive disruption across the world this year with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns that we've all had to endure and that we've gone through. And from a business perspective, my full-time role at First Rand is to help lead what's called digital transformation. And digital transformation is about changing business models and making the maximum use of technology to ensure that, certainly for large organizations like First Rand and FNB, which is one of the companies in First Rand, we're rewiring ourselves for a very different future. And the past, is no determinant of the future. And so as we see the world changing around us, we have to adapt to how we do things. And the reality is that previously digital transformation made sense because it would help us reduce costs, it would help us improve customer service. Digital transformation made us more nimble, made us quicker and more responsive, and we were able to push out better products and services, etc. But the reality is that in 2020, digital transformation was actually accelerated because it became a medical issue. It became a matter of life and death, that people were able to interact with each other digitally, that people were able to act with companies to get products and services digitally. And so we've seen a surge of 1 billion people onto digital platforms. I think, at work we always had this idea that, we could offer people to work from home, but really the real work happened at the office. And I think that was a badly thought through notion, which has completely flipped around this year. And for companies to have survived, they've had to suddenly rely on digital platforms to make sure that their employees can still meet and present and drive value, etc. So as much as we've been trying to drive digital transformation in our organizations, and we'll have teams trying to make this successful, the reality is that COVID-19 and the lockdowns of 2020 have done more for digital transformation than any other strategic initiative or event or framework or anything else, certainly that I've seen that companies like ourselves have been trying to do. But let's take a step back. Let's just rewind a little bit. 2020 has obviously disrupted a lot more than just our approach to digital transformation. Even before 2020, digital had been wreaking havoc on the business world. And you can see this quote there from Accenture, that if you look at the Fortune 500, it monitors obviously the top companies in the world. And the reality is that since year 2000, and previously it was a fairly stable list. If you bought shares in the Fortune 500, you'd get a good return. But since 2000, half of those companies literally just disappeared off the Fortune 500. And we've seen instead the rise of exponential firms that have taken advantage of technology and turned industries upside down. And we'll talk about it just now, but we've seen this idea of the digital winners and losers. So this is something that the business world, even before the lockdowns of this year, had been grappling with. And I talk about all of this in a lot more detail in the Digital Masterclass course, which really takes you through the practical issues that businesses are facing and that businesses are having to grapple with and to put in place to survive. So if we look at a couple of examples, and my favorite one that I use when I talk is on the left there, the Kodak versus Instagram story. Now, for many years, Kodak was a household name. It was the fourth most valuable brand in the United States. It had 140,000 employees. And really, when you thought about the capturing and the preservation of human memories through photographs, you really associated that with Kodak. And Kodak was your go-to company or trusted brand for photography and for photographs and for the important role that those played in social gatherings and families and friends. And yet, in 2012, so despite that history of success, despite being so big, despite being such a strong brand, in 2012, they filed for bankruptcy. And they hadn't read the market. They had understood the power that technology was going to have, and the way it was going to change the way in which people captured and created and shared photography. And the reality was it was Instagram and other apps like Instagram at the time who figured out that the future of human memories would be digital and social. And so you can go and read the case study, and I talk about it in my course, but Kodak filed for bankruptcy in February of 2012. Within the next 6 months, Instagram, which had 14 employees working out of a garage effectively, were valued at $500 million and then bought by Facebook for $1 billion. So you have this dramatic change of fortunes between, the legacy trusted brands and the startup exponential firms that haven't relied on scale and brand goodwill, but have leveraged technology in powerful ways and responded to how their customers want to use that technology. And so, the interesting thing out of that case study is that Kodak actually had digital photographic technology. In the late 80s, early 90s, they figured out that they could capture photographs digitally. And so the problem was, the engineers that figured this out, and I talk a lot about, how to set up an innovative culture in an organization, but Kodak at the time were worried about digital photography because it would cannibalize their film and photographic paper business. And so they didn't use digital photography. They kept it under wraps, and they hoped that nobody else would figure it out and challenge them with it. So they timed it badly. They didn't allow that innovation to come through and influence their primary business models. And of course, what happened was, instead of self-disrupting themselves, from within, they were disrupted from the outside. And those brands, all of those, have similar stories. Netflix, top right, is an interesting one. So Blockbuster was the biggest retail DVD chain in America, very large company in actual fact, and riding a massive wave of quality content being made available on physical DVDs that people would drive to the store to go and check out and take home and watch. And Netflix at the time were a small website. They actually went to present to Blockbuster. They had got a meeting with the board of Blockbuster, and they went and they said, "Look, guys, this was late 90s. They said, we think this internet thing is going to get bigger and bigger, and we'd like to partner with you, and we'd like to actually run your online business. So let's say, for example, now customers wanted to order a DVD online, look at the trailer of the video, whatever the case may be, and then have it mailed to them." And they said, well, we think we've got some great ideas for this, and we think that your business is going to shift over time into that space, and we'd like to offer you, our technology for that. And they were literally thrown out of the boardroom because the boardroom really felt that, people would always be driving to a store, or at least, phoning a call center and using a physical product like a DVD to watch their movies. And Netflix, we know the story, absolutely, that, from that point onwards, they just grew and grew and grew to the point where Blockbuster's gone. They're a digital loser, and of course, Netflix is a digital winner, the leading streamer of movies. Now, interestingly, in the middle there, you'll recognize the Sony Walkman. Sony, iconic Walkman that people would wear on their belts and listen to music in a cassette tape. They didn't self-disrupt. They also had digital audio capabilities, but of course it was Apple's iPod Shuffle that people found a lot more convenient to use. It could carry 10,000 times the number of songs that a Sony Walkman could in its cassette. And of course, we all know from history how popular the iPod Shuffle became. Now, what Apple did very differently to Blockbuster and Kodak was they realized that there was going to be a convergence between the device that people were listening to music on and their phones. And so they realized they had to lead that, and they did, but it was at the cost of the iPod Shuffle, and the iPod Shuffle was effectively shut down. There are still a few very niche products available, but they cannibalized themselves for the sake of the success of their overall business. So, whether it's digital product winners or losers, or enterprise winners or losers, the cycle of creative destruction that is happening in the world, and that we've seen through these brands, has just become faster and faster. And I mean, think of most of us on this call today are, we study these trends, or you are students of, topics from any faculty, and it's important that you get into the nuts and bolts of how things work. You want to unpack things. I'm an engineer, and I'm sure, we've got doctors and, people from all different faculties on the call this morning. The very fact that you're at university means you want to try and understand something works. So Calvin's asked on the chat, the rapid obsolescence of companies is because they're seeing digital transformation as solely the adoption of new tech and not leveraging digital to change the business model. Absolutely. It's not technology or the absence of technology that causes a company to lose out in digital disruption. It's their lack of response to it. That is the single biggest reason. And so what I've got there in front of you now is the couple of examples of the discontinuity of product innovation. And I think, Calvin, to your point, you have to be able to jump from one cycle of creative destruction to the next. So on the left, if you were to ask the driver of that horse-drawn cart there, what is his requirement to improve that product? He would say, I'd want a faster horse, or he'd want any sort of incremental improvement to that system of transport that you see there. And yet it took someone standing outside of that way of doing things and the established approach to solving people's problems to come up with a driverless, a horseless cart, and to replace it with a mechanical contraption called the modern motor vehicle engine. And there is no way that you can incrementally improve a candle to get to a light bulb. And all the 10,000 failed light bulb experiments that Thomas Edison had were all stepping stones of product innovation that took us to the modern filament light bulb that we have today. And so I think, Calvin, to your question on the chat, it's also about misunderstanding this concept that there, in some cases, is no amount of incremental innovation you can apply to a product to ensure your long-term success. So a DVD, it's going to reach a point where there is no more product innovation you can apply to meet your customers' long-term expectations. The same with a cassette player, even though it's on your belt in a Sony Walkman. The expectations of your customers are going to change so radically because of what is available in the market. You have to be confident about, having a break with the past, having a completely different way of doing things. And this is also what companies haven't figured out, and how they need to set themselves up so that they can incubate, these innovative ideas and then move them into the mainstream of their business, when they feel they're willing to take a bet on them and to put them into the core of their business and to offer them to the core of their market. And the companies that have done that, we've seen, companies rise up and become extremely successful through what we call exponential growth. And, those of us who've got a sort of a basic background of maths, you'll know a graph can go up in a straight line, or it can go up exponentially. And we've seen things like population growth around the world and many other phenomena follow exponential growth. And if you look at the user numbers of Facebook, if you look at the growth of WhatsApp, if you look at the share price of Instagram, for example, they all follow the exponential curve. And exponential thinking, as actually has its roots in very old and ancient times with the inventor of chess. And the inventor of chess was offered any reward by the emperor. And he said that he wanted rice. And at that time, obviously, rice was a very valuable commodity. And he said, okay, fine. Well, how much rice do you want? He said, take a chessboard. I want you to put 1 grain of rice on the first block. And then on the next block, put 2. And the second block, put 4, 8, 16. And keep doubling the number of grains of rice, for each block on the chessboard until you get to the end. And eventually, when they figured out how impossible it was to meet his requirement, that he was actually executed. So the legend has it. But the point is that when you understand the power of doubling through an exponential growth curve, and what these exponential growth companies have figured out is platform-enabled ecosystems. So Facebook and WhatsApp are all these networked organizations that don't rely on a value chain, where in the second and third industrial revolutions you had large companies pushing products down to customers and them just consuming it. And it was the broadcast media where we were told pretty much what were the brands that we needed to use, and they were good for us and we must just take them and trust the brand. Now we have a voice. Now we're also producers of information and content and reviews, and all of this goes into these networked ecosystems. And the compound effect comes from what we call network effects. So you would not use Uber if you were not certain that there was a Uber driver within 5 or 10 minutes of your house. You would not use Facebook if there were only 100 people on there. You use Facebook because you know that other people are there. And this is the power of exponential thinking in a networked business model. The value to any user goes up when more users join. And that's how these guys figured out the power of exponential growth. So let's take Netflix, for example. Because you have feedback mechanisms and you have algorithms that are monitoring who's watching what videos, you can rank which videos based on what it is that you like to watch and what your history of watching would determine from that algorithm you would like to watch in future, because all that information goes back into their databases. And that's why the power of data is so important. And the more ratings and the more users get onto Netflix and use their services, the more that data becomes powerful for everybody else. Whereas if you just order a DVD in the mail, like from Blockbuster, or if you go down, they may have a bestseller shelf. But again, how true is that a reflection of the customer's perceptions of those videos? Whereas with Netflix and with Spotify and all of these other highly evolutionary marketplaces of information, there's a high degree of trust in how they work to provide you with value. And that's how they achieve that exponential growth. Now in the banking space, where I've obviously made my career and spent 20 years, we've seen the rise of things like Bitcoin and the telecoms, MTN and Vodacom, and even the investment companies like Discovery getting into transactional banking. And a lot of it is driven by changing customer behavior. So the digital natives, like yourselves, millennials, that simply won't stand in a queue. You won't fill in a form. Your trust is going to go into brands that provide you with convenience and reliable products and services. You're not just going to trust a brand because your parents and your grandparents used it. And so we have to work extremely hard to meet new and changing customer experience expectations and leverage technology to do that in the best possible way. And so from a F&B perspective, with a strongly trusted, innovative brand, I think we have the culture whereby we can, incubate, new and interesting and dynamic technology, and then make decisions as to when we bring that into our primary business models. And hopefully our customers have seen us stay up to date with those trends and to continually offer them the most innovative and highly digitized products and services to give them the greatest amount of value. So guys, that was just a quick 20-minute introduction to the topics of digital disruption and digital transformation. And I've sat down this year, had a bit of spare time in lockdown, and I sort of really took all the work that I've done on this topic over the years and my real hands-on experience of driving this, within FirstRand, and I packaged it into a course called the Digital Masterclass. And you can see some of the feedback there. And I take you through a series of lessons in 2 sections. The first one really talks to digital disruption, some of the themes and concepts that I've introduced in this webinar. We talk about a couple of those digital winners and losers and how that's turned business and industries upside down. And then I talk about the second half of Exponential. So if you think about that chessboard, and if you visualize an exponential curve, we definitely feel we're in the second half of that exponential growth. And that's one of the reasons why the compound effects of all of this disruption from digital and related technologies is just going to continue to be, very destructive in the next number of years. So Calvin's asked about generational theory, and yes, I certainly believe that. I mean, you can actually go and read a book by Graham Codrington called Mind the Gap, and he talks about how generational thinking is important when we sort of personify or create avatars of our customers and understand how to reach them. So yes, absolutely. I think that a baby boomer versus a Gen X versus a millennial has got a very different approach to consuming products and services in any different industry, and any company's got to make sure that their approach is linked to that. And maybe that touches on that second last lesson there that I talk about, how the crazy ones do it. And you'll know the quote from Steve Jobs, the crazy ones are the ones who think they can change the world simply because, and they manage to do that simply because they're crazy enough to think that they can. So people like Elon Musk, is good South African, he had nothing to lose. He went over to the States with $20 in his pocket. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, and it was only when he came back that he actually transformed Apple into the company with the products and services that have made it so successful today. And so I think the generational aspect comes through in the fact that there's a degree of frustration, there's a degree of yearning for change and new ways of doing things. Banking lost a lot of trust in 2008, and people couldn't understand why large organizations had let society down, and so that perception of or lack of trust that's built in a lot of industries, I think, which has come through new generations challenging old generational way of thinking, has driven a lot of the digital disruption, Calvin, to your point. And then digital strategy has got to think about that and take that into account as far as possible. And really where that comes in is when a firm then says, okay, so we observe in the industry that there is digital disruption happening. We don't want to be a Kodak. We want to be an Instagram. We may still be the same company, and like Apple, we're willing to cannibalize our own product lines to stay in business. And we may have a new product that we replace, an old one with. That's fine. We're in the business of keeping our customers and thinking about how we want to change ourselves from their perspective and giving them exactly what they want. We're not in the business of just pushing the products that we think our customers want. So one of the lessons there, get obsessed, with customer experience. What is it that firms need to do to digitally rewire themselves so that they avoid dying a digital death? And I talk in the course about the F&B Code Fest. So I, personally, helped run that. And it eventually became a Harvard Business Review case study written up by Gibbs University, which was an extension of our innovation program, but effectively took the hackathon model that we've seen with a lot of the tech firms and how they've developed their products, and allowed their employees the innovative space and freedom to come up with new ways of doing things. So for example, Facebook, their like button came from one of their internal hackathons. Google Maps search. So they said, well, we can search the web. Why can't we search on maps? That came out of a hackathon. So I talk in the course a little bit about the F&B Code Fest, and you can actually find a more detailed course on the F&B Code Fest in one of my other courses about high-performing teams. But I do give you some insights to the F&B Code Fest and how that's an example of disrupting yourself, and getting our employees back into the garage, out of the cubicles, out of the siloed organizational friction and blockers, and into a space where they can just do new things. And then what's important is for leadership to then look at these new ways of doing things and think about how they bring them into the mainstream part of their business. And I've been, so thrilled to see a lot of the winning prototypes from CodeFest that we ran it over the last 4 or 5 years eventually sort of pop up in our improved customer value proposition. So I'm thrilled to work for a company where that innovative culture does see, a space for the crazy ones to do crazy things, and understand what it takes for us to keep our customers and what they want and how they see the future, and then for us then to bring that into the main part of our business and offer that to our customers. And really that's the future of banking. And if you look at a bank like Tinkoff in Russia, biggest digital bank in the world, they're probably the most advanced from a digital transformation perspective, and they sort of have the term of a super app where they create an ecosystem around their customers. And of course financial services and products are going to be part of that, but it's really more focused around the life stages of customers and everything that customers will need around that. And we've certainly started to do that with things like Nav Money and Nav Car, where we give you holistic non-banking related services. Ultimately it is going to be a form of originating customers into those products like a home loan. But the simple fact is that you wake up on a Sunday morning, you don't decide to phone FNB for a home loan. You decide to look in the newspaper for a new house. That's the emotional life stage perspective that you'll have. Why should we only help you when you get to pay, when you have to then open a home loan? And what we found was that the mortgage originators had disintermediated us because they'd got close with the estate agents. So when people were shown a house, they were then offered a home loan on the spot, but the estate agents had preferred arrangements with the home loan originators. So we gone all the way back up that value chain, right to the point of when a customer wants to look for a house, and on their app, we offer them insights about evaluation on their own house and properties available in the whatever suburb they want to go and live, etc. And if you take it even further, in that trusted ecosystem, and if you're potentially buying a house from another FNB customer, there's a higher degree of trust because you're in that same ecosystem. If you think about it, when you take an Uber, do you personally know the Uber driver? No, you don't. And yet that's a much lower risk than driving home after a party. But you trust the platform because everyone else uses it, and because Uber would have vetted their drivers, and because there would be monitoring and feedback built into the platform. Now, yes, of course, there are obviously exceptions, but they are very, very small and limited. In the vast majority of cases, a well-designed platform-enabled ecosystem is a very powerful business model for a firm that wants to digitally transform. Guys, please add any questions in the chat, and I'll deal with them as they come up, and hope that you are getting value from this. We're sort of about halfway through now. And the second half of this webinar, what we wanted to share with you, and hopefully you getting some value and some insight so far. And what I'll do is I'll just pop the digital masterclass free access seat on the chat so that you can go in there and actually start enrolling, and that'll be available for the next few days. And then obviously once you've enrolled, you can get access to that course, and I continually update it, and I put announcements on there, and there's a place where you can go and meet up. So as soon as you go into the digital masterclass, one of the first lessons is then a call to action for you to go in and introduce yourself on the Q&A board, and just give us a sense of where you're from and what it is that you want to learn. And I really just in my courses try and drive a lot of engagement between students, between students and students, and between myself and the students, and it just enhances the learning experience. For the second half of this webinar, what I wanted to take you through was then, okay, so now, we've had digital disruption. We've got firms that are going through digital transformation. It's been accelerated in 2020. what does that mean at a practical level for employees that have perhaps adopted these channels, and not only for employees, but team leaders and managers and people who still need to drive productivity, and who still need to make sure that employees, even though they're not meeting physically together, and if you drive through Sandton, you'll see it's dead quiet. The office parks are all empty. No one is going into the offices anymore. And I think, from a business perspective, and myself personally, I've had so much more time at home with my family. Yes, I don't know whether I live at work or whether I work from home, and all those boundaries have been blurred. And we'll figure that out. I think in 6 months we'll have found the right balance. We'll take the best from what we get by working at the office and the collaboration that we have and the physical interaction that we need, and we'll combine it with the best of what working from home offers us. And part of this course that I sort of am going to talk you through now, and the value that I want you to get from this webinar, is the practical tips and tricks that I teach in the course about how employees can stay productive and use tools like MS Teams. So in a corporate environment, MS Teams is probably your predominant online meeting platform, and we obviously also know of many others in the market, but I take you through some of the principles of how to set up and run a workshop or to present in an online setting. And you can see there on the screen, one of the first lessons in the course is just a whiteboard overview to give you some of those principles and practicalities before I then take you into some of the detail in the course. And you can hop onto my blog as well and see some of the articles that I've written there. And for me, when I had to run my first workshop from home, it was very, very strange, because now I was sitting on my patio looking at my laptop, and I knew that there were 30 other people out there, hopefully looking at their laptop, but I didn't know if they were walking the dog, if they were watching TV, if they were helping sort their kids out, if they were making lunch, or if they just muted me and turned the sound off. Now, if I was in a physical workshop, the biggest issue I'd have to deal with is somebody maybe checking their phone or doing some emails. So that we really need practical tools and tips to help people present and manage workshops better. And that's really what I take people through in the course called Learn Online Workshop Facilitation and Tips for Microsoft Teams. So whichever platform you use, there's a lot of principles that are applicable in the course, but I do also go into specifics around MS Teams. And you can see there that, I had a comment last night on the course where there was actually an announcement in this lady's company to say we're switching across to MS Teams. So she popped onto Udemy, she searched for MS Teams workshops, and my course came up because it's top ranked on Udemy. And she popped in and did the course. And she got some really valuable tips and tricks about running workshops and meetings in an online format. So what you'll learn from the course, it's important to drive productivity and for teams to have the credibility of the great content and the alignment that you get by running these sessions. And I translate a lot of what I've done in the real world or in a physical workshop into an online context, and explain to people how they can stay productive and still create engaging and meaningful workshops, even though themselves and everybody else is working from home. So here's a practical insight to the course, and I teach people how to present on MS Teams. And one of the single biggest issues that I see, or hear rather, is when somebody's presenting, they then say, well, I can't see the chat, or I can't see the questions, because when they present a slideshow and it's on their laptop or their PC, the slideshow takes up the whole of the screen. And so that means they are disengaged from the rest of the meeting. All they're looking at is their slides. Now, if you see in that screenshot that I've shown you there, and what I teach in the course, is that you should then access Microsoft Teams from a second device. And I just use my phone, and I bought a very cheap cell phone holder, and I stick it up next to my main PC. And I can then view my own presentation on that secondary device. but I'm then monitoring the interaction between the attendees of the meeting, including the chat and the questions, because I, as the presenter or the facilitator of the workshop, also need to interact with people. I need to monitor questions, I need to adjust my presentation, I need to pause, I need to slow down, etc. And I need to make use of all the features that Microsoft Teams gives me. And I can't do that if I can't see those features. So that's one of the tips that I teach. And thanks, Calvin. I appreciate that. One sort of figures these things out. Microsoft Teams since came out with an update whereby you can actually look at your call screen on a separate window. But then what people don't figure out is that when you launch your slideshow, you can actually launch your slideshow as a separate window and not as a full screen. So for example, if you were to see my screen right now, I've launched my slideshow in a smaller window and I've minimized that to one side. So I can see exactly what you're seeing on the screen, but then I can also see the chat and I can see all the metrics that YouTube give me about monitoring this webinar. And I actually don't need a second device now. So what I do in my work meetings is I actually use the audio from my phone because I've got my AirPods and that's a better quality for me to listen to. And then I see visually on the screen, having separated the call screen window and the slideshow or the agenda, and putting them both side by side on the screen. So the one interesting thing there is if you can see that image just above my keyboard, other people will see me appearing twice in the meeting, and that's just my two devices. But it gives me a lot of optionality in terms of muting or unmuting or viewing or not viewing material in the meetings. And the reality is that our lives have moved online. And you guys, whether you're presenting, proposals or assignments or projects or doing teamwork in syndicates, at varsity, etc., you don't need to wait till you get to the workplace before you get some value from these platforms and before you practice and learn how to be a better presenter in workshops and facilitations. So these are just practical things that I take you through in the course. And one more is the polls feature in Microsoft Teams. And what Microsoft Teams provides is the option for the organizer to set up a poll so that you can get feedback on any specific issue that's being discussed in the meeting without having to disrupt the flow of the discussion or the audio-visual material that everyone's consuming. Because remember, in a physical meeting room where you've got 30, 40 people, you can read body language, you can see if somebody wants to raise a question. And often when I run workshops, I often set up multiple breakout groups with different flip charts, and I can walk around them and I can engage with all of them. Now you've got a very linear flow of audio-visual communication. And if you break that, it costs everybody the precious time that they've invested in the meeting. You cannot have more than one person talking at the same time. You can have chat, etc., but a more structured approach to getting feedback on issues during workshops is to run a poll. And you literally set up a poll in Microsoft Teams. You can have up to 6 topics that you put in a poll, and then people can vote on those poll options, and then you can dynamically see what people's responses are to that. So for example, and I just set this up as an illustration, and I teach this in the course, and I'll take you through step by step exactly how to set up a poll. But the results of the sample poll that I ran there was just to ask a team in a workshop how soon they felt it would be appropriate to get back to a physical team meeting, and obviously with the correct social distancing aspects and all the rest of it. And then very simple, just to put a couple of options there, we should do it in the next 4 weeks or only in level 1 or after another 2 months, for example. And so that's a very quick and efficient way of getting feedback in a group session, but when everyone is online. And a lot of people haven't realized that they've got access to these features. And as I've sort of learned myself and done these in my own meetings, I've shared these tips and tricks with people, and of course continue to update the material in the online workshops course. So just to wrap up then, and what I'll do now is to just pop the other course on the chat, and then you guys can go in there and do the course. And please, guys, I really would request that for both courses and any course that you do of mine, I really need, your rating on the course, as well as a detailed review with specifics about what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, what you think I could improve, and then what goals you managed to achieve as a result of doing that course. So please, for both of those courses, please do take the time to leave a rating and a review, so that I can, get the improvements that I need for future material. It's absolutely so critical for course owners and creators, and it's almost, for the teacher, there's no other way of getting feedback. When I used to present in a lecture hall or to 20-30 people in a room, I could see body language and I could get feedback, and before people walked out of the room, I'd get them to fill in a feedback form, and I could get real-time input on my teaching style and on the content, etc. But now you put your heart and soul into creating a course and putting it out there on whatever platform, and you sort of desperately then want some feedback and need to get an indication from your students of how useful the course has been to them. Guys, a couple of questions on the chat. We'll deal with those, and then we'll wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. So Jahil Jacob says that he gets the idea that companies don't want to change their business models, that they claim to be successful for years. Could this be a reason as to why companies are not coping with this new way of doing things? Absolutely. And there are many reasons why businesses don't want to change. And I talk about this in the course. And it could fail. They could do the wrong thing. They could pick a product that doesn't work. So I linked in the course, and you can find it on my blog, to a book called Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And what he talks about there is the importance of being agile and being able to pivot and adapt in terms of how you run product launches. And typically what you'll find is that within a large bank or a large organization, they'll run pilots and they'll get early feedback, like we were saying about course content, and they'll get an early indication of how well supported that new innovative approach would be before they actually launched it. And you will see that there's lots of failures. I mean, even Google, you can go and ironically Google the Google graveyard, and the Google graveyard is all of their failed product launches. Jeff Bezos, I mean, he tried to launch a telephone, a cell phone. It was a massive failure. Google have failed hundreds and hundreds of times. So Jahil, to answer your question, is that companies don't want to change because they know they're not quick enough to adapt if something doesn't work. So they've built up a lot of friction in the way they do things, and it's actually that friction that keeps them from doing something new, because they're scared if it doesn't work, they can't quickly switch back to what they were doing before. And it's also a leadership issue. So people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and a lot of people that I write about on my blog, these are all guys that are highly agile, highly flexible in their leadership style, highly willing to quickly acknowledge when they've made a mistake and to change tack. So companies are not coping with the new way of doing things precisely for that very reason, that they don't have the agility built into their culture, built into their leadership, built into their product innovation value chains, to support doing things differently and adjusting very quickly and dynamically if they need to. Now, back again to the lockdowns of 2020, overnight, companies that have said, for example, they're never going to move into e-commerce. So companies that had a retail presence, they had stores in shopping centers, etc., and they said, no, we are never going to move online because our customers are always going to have to come in to try on our shoes or try on their clothes or read the book on the shelf before they buy it, etc. Now, if you can imagine, no one was going into shopping centers, so they had to adapt. They suddenly had to get onto e-commerce platforms. They had to move their businesses online. And in actual fact, it became a means of survival. I mean, in some cases, we had to get groceries online. So companies had to adapt to digital ways of doing things, again, because of lockdown. So it was no longer, companies not being able to cope with new ways of doing things because it was out of choice or competitive advantage. It was now out of survival. And sometimes it's those existential threats to an organization or to a business model that sometimes results in the greatest amount of innovation. So you disrupt or die. And there are many examples, of companies who have managed to reinvent themselves and who, because they were about to go out of business, had to completely change their business models. And I think coming out of this year, we're going to see a lot of examples like that. So guys, just to wrap up, University of Pretoria, I think it's been an absolutely fantastic webinar. I've enjoyed sharing with you some thoughts about digital disruption and digital transformation, and that's all contained in my class, Digital Masterclass, How Technology is Changing the World. And I take you through there, a series of lessons in 2 sections that give you the principles and the practices of digital disruption, a couple of the household and case studies and brand names that I sort of introduced earlier in this webinar, and then I go into the digital transformation that actually happens in organizations as they respond to what's happening in their industry. And then in the second half of the webinar, we looked at then the impact on employees and teams and students and families and everybody working from home, and the digital platforms that they've had to get used to and use to interact so that they can stay in touch with their teams and still be productive. And the tool that I use at work is Microsoft Teams, and that's the platform that I teach some tips and tricks in the course, which I combine with some principles and practices of online workshops and presentations. And if you look at my courses on Udemy in general, you'll find a couple of other related courses that you might also want to have a look at, like, for example, the high performing team, which I go into a lot more detail around the hackathons that we ran through the F&B Code Fest, and some of the principles of Agile that emerged from that. And then linked to the online workshops, I have another course more dedicated to how to present. So how to construct slides and how to prepare yourself as a presenter, and a lot more of those principles and practices, both for presenting in an online world and in a physical world, because I think we will get back to physical interaction and conferences where people are meeting up physically. And so those skills are going to be still incredibly important. And Nontokozo Vilakazi has just asked, how long will the courses be available after you enroll? Nontokozi, the courses will be available to you forever. So once you enroll, the free access will last for 3 days from this morning. So just make sure within the next 3 days that you enroll, and once you are enrolled in that course, you've got access to it, and you will get all the updates, you will get all the announcements, you'll get all the new material that I put into the material there, and that's the value that I want to offer to University of Pretoria. And all that I ask in return is obviously that you leave a rating and a review, and that you consider joining us on the Student Success Coach Facebook group and subscribing onto the YouTube channel. And then, of course, you'll get a lot more content, a lot more courses in due course. And then, future webinars and future course launches, whenever I launch a course, I obviously do discount it and make it available for people so they can get feedback and improve it. And again, that's, innovative, agile product launch principles, is to get that feedback before you then take it wider and broader. And my courses are done internationally across the world. And you can see the student reviews, you can see the feedback that other people have put onto those courses. But really this webinar was really focused on University of Pretoria students, and giving you exclusive value and insights from myself, an hour of my time to talk you through some of these principles and practices, and then also to give you free access into these 2 courses, which you just need to enroll in for the next 3 days. And once you've enrolled there, you'll have permanent access to them. And also just get in touch with me. Join the Facebook group, pop me a note, get in touch. Let's engage. The most important thing, I've had a couple of coaching calls with some of you from the previous webinar. As I said at the beginning, I do offer, sort of a 30-minute coaching call just to find out where you are, just give you a quick sense of, what I think, you need to focus on, etc. I've been there. I've been exactly where you are, stressing about exams or assignments, or having to write a thesis, or having to do research. And I really think I have a good sense of what it takes to be successful. and that's why, you know, I offer the community and the content that I do in the Student Success Coach. So Lorato, it's a pleasure. Thank you for your comments. It's a pleasure to provide this informative webinar. Delia B, it's a pleasure to offer these courses. David, absolute pleasure. Koketso says, thanks so much, Peter, for this webinar. Looking forward to doing the courses. Koketso, I look forward to seeing you in the lessons. You know, please interact with me and with other students inside the courses. Oluduni, pleasure to provide this webinar. Calvin, absolutely greatest of pleasure. You know, so look me up. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. Obviously, the links are all there in the YouTube videos. Guys, I think we've done very well in this webinar. We had a very good turnout, and I hope that you've all got lots of value from the session. I've certainly enjoyed sharing it with you and presenting this material. You know, I always find new ways of presenting it and thinking about it each time that I do it. So hopefully that came through. And of course, a lot more available to you in the courses. So do go through them, follow the lessons in sequence, or pick out the ones that you feel the most interesting and useful. Leave a rating and a review, and we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar. So those of you that have got exams coming up, I think we always used to say when the jacarandas come into bloom in South Africa, we know that we should be studying by then. So if you've got exams coming up, good luck for your exams. If you've got assignments and research reports due, you know, hop onto any of my other courses that help you improve your academic performance and your writing. And there's some real tips and tricks in there that will just, you know, help support you in your student success. And of course, you will get the greatest amount of support from each other and people that are going through similar issues and have worked out how to deal with these things. And that is critically important. So together with the previous webinar, when we looked at writing and employability, hopefully you guys have got lots of value from these two sessions. And hopefully we'll be able to do a couple more in the future. But do check out my other courses, have a look at the other content, you know, subscribe up onto the YouTube channel, and you'll see regular videos coming out there, particularly related to being successful as an academic student, both at an undergraduate level and at a postgraduate level. Courage, thank you very much. Sipa Sishle, Tyson, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the webinar this morning. Hope you guys all have a good day ahead. It's just a couple of days to the weekend, but I'm well aware that for many students, you know, like myself, we often manage to put in the extra time on the weekend, but it will be worth it in the long run. You know, we're all studying and learning and attending webinars and gaining these tools and tricks and skills because we want to, you know, improve where we are in life. We know that, you know, we can achieve more and do more, but it requires us to take action. So, you know, where I'll leave it, the webinar this morning is for you to take action, go and enroll in those courses, get through the content, acquire those skills, take action, join us in the Facebook group, subscribe up onto the YouTube channel. And of course, if you think it's valuable for your colleagues and other students in whatever circles and communities you operate, of course, you know, please do share that with other people and reach out to me if I can be of any specific assistance to you. Janet Maunganidze, thank you for your comments. It's been a pleasure to provide you with the session this morning, and to all of you that have interacted on the chat and with myself already on Facebook and YouTube and inside Udemy and even on LinkedIn. I'll continue to do my absolute best to be available to you and to continue producing the best possible content to achieve your student success. So guys, we are going to finish the webinar. Thanks all for attending, and you can obviously access the live stream recording at the same place with the same link. And if you need to get access to the courses and the coupons that I provided to you this morning, those will be in the description. But as I say, only free access for the next 3 days. Just enroll in there, get access to the course, and then you'll have it permanently available for you to go in and to get a refresh or get any updates on those courses as and when I do go in and upgrade them. All right, so University of Pretoria, that's brought our webinar to a close this morning. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Maxwell, thank you. It's a pleasure. Yes, he says, thank you, coach. It's a real pleasure, Maxwell. What makes me get fulfillment out of this is to see your success. So may you guys be successful, and then I know that if I've had any role in contributing to that, it gives me the greatest amount of fulfillment. Thanks, Lorato. Hope you have a good day. It's 11 o'clock. We're going to finish off our webinar. Thanks. Goodbye, everybody. Cheers.